Hi, everybody. We're back. So, today at KFM, we have a pretty heavy topic to talk about. Pada hari ini, kita akan ceritakan kisah burnout. Tapi sebelum tu, seperti biasa, saya akan menceritakan sedikit tentang apakah tujuan kita bersama dalam podcast Kita Family, ya. So, di Kita Family ini, kami bersama-sama untuk membincangkan perihal yang berkaitan dengan hidup bermasyarakat, hidup secara inklusif, untuk menghargai dan meraihkan kepelbagaian sesama kita, sama ada dari segi rupa, agama, bangsa dan juga keupayaan. Hari ini adik kami tak ada. Adik kita family tak ada. Desiree is not here. She's traveling
Miss you,
a little bit.
Desiree. Hello.
Tapi let me just introduce everybody who's here in the studio. Nama saya Nuri dan di sebelah saya is kakak. So we have kakak here. We don't have adik.
Apa khabar?
Yeah. And over there memakai baju merah, Ani.
Hello.
Dan secara langsung, not langsung but secara langsung with us, yes, dari Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, Didi. Hi.
Hai, Assalamualaikum.
Okay, so alright, shall we get to it dengan topik yang agak berat ya pada hari ini. For today's topic, I have notes also and also because topik ni bagi saya sendiri memang sesuatu yang mencabar sebab saya sendiri pernah melalui burnout. So apakah burnout? Burnout ni adalah satu keadaan di mana secara mental, secara fizikal, dari segi emosi, kita dah terlalu penat. So it's a state where your emotions, your physical body, and and of course mentally you are just exhausted. And why? It's basically prolonged and excessive stress. So maknanya keadaan stres yang kita rasai sudah berpanjangan, right? And it's too much stress. So this is when we have a situation of burnout. Yeah. So ini bukan stres yang kadang-kadang berlaku, and ini lain ya daripada anxiety, dan tidak sama juga dengan kemurungan atau depression. It just you start to feel memang sangat-sangat penat. Or you don't actually quite realise what's going on. You're a little bit removed from reality. Masih berfungsi, terus melakukan apa yang perlu, terutama I think bagi ibu. I think dalam mungkin budaya kita dan tanggungjawab kita buat masa ini, ibu-ibu terutamanya telah belajar bagaimana untuk berfungsi. Sungguh pun dalam tahap burnout, right? Tapi what happens kalau kita tak tangani burnout is a breakdown, and that's where we never want to get to that point, because we're talking about kalau dah jadi macam tu, maknanya I think it's like a penyakit already lah, right? It could affect your physical health by you really falling ill, becoming chronic disease mungkin. You could really have a total breakdown, and when you have that, then you totally shut down and you cannot function anymore. Yeah. So we're going to take a look at apakah antara simptom-simptom yang menunjukkan bahawa kemungkinan burnout ini berlaku, dan of course kita ingin juga menceritakan bagaimana kita nak menangani burnout, apakah kepentingan ini dan kenapa kita sebut pasal burnout. Well, burnout rate di kalangan ibu bapa kepada individu OKU, anak-anak OKU, anak-anak neurodivergent, sangat jelas dan ditunjukkan oleh bermacam-macam kajian yang telah dilakukan di bermacam-macam negara, termasuk negara kita sendiri, jelas menunjukkan bahawa levels of stress dan juga burnout memang lebih tinggi di kalangan ibu bapa seperti kami. Yeah, because parenting is, as we know, for all of you who just have children, whatever kind of children, um, is already tough, and it can be tough. There will be certain phases, something's going through, your child is going through ke, ataupun pada masa-masa tertentu anak kita going through puberty and things like that. Memang stres akan lebih tinggi. Tetapi untuk ibu bapa yang mempunyai anak neurodivergent atau OKU, the level of stress is kadang-kala lebih tinggi hampir sepanjang masa dan bukan sahaja mengikut fasa-fasa tertentu. Ni juga termasuk kanak-kanak yang mempunyai penyakit yang serious, medical issues and conditions that are very, very serious, that require round-the-clock care. So obviously memang peranan dan tanggungjawab di mana perlu membeli sokongan tambahan, perlu menghabiskan lebih banyak masa bersama-sama dengan anak, perlu melakukan bermacam-macam benda yang mungkin tak perlu bersama-sama dengan anak neurotypical, and it can range from anything, right? Which is like financial stress ataupun lebih kerap ulang-alik berjumpa dengan doktor sebagai contoh, and then of course keperluan untuk terapi. So mungkin kalau ibu bapa biasa mereka fikirkan apakah aktiviti tambahan untuk anak, ataupun keperluan adalah seperti tuition, kelas-kelas tertentu. Tapi untuk anak-anak yang memerlukan yang sokongan tambahan ni, then the list is much longer. So I think it's pretty easy to see, right, why the stress can also be much higher. So I'm gonna jump straight to the ladies today and ask each of you. I wonder if I can start with Kakak, and if you would like to share with us if there is a medical side or perspective to burnout that perhaps I didn't already mention or is worth elaborating. Atau kalau tak, silakan kalau nak menceritakan apa pandangan dan pendapat SK mengenai burnout di kalangan ibu bapa seperti kami. Silakan.
Thank you, Nori. Memang sebagai, as you were speaking actually, I was reflecting. Before the medical aspect, I was reflecting, going back a little bit, masa anak saya masih bayi. The contribution to kepenatan can be as simple as their inability to go to sleep, kan? And I remember masa tu when I was going to put him to sleep, I was constantly sepanjang masa worry that he will not be able to go to sleep. And just the constant worry about not having that regular pattern of going to bedtime, in spite of us learning and preparing about the routine, and yet it may not happen. So I just want to just revisit how those experience bedtime, inability because the sleep pattern memang disturbed, can contribute also to not only mothers but any carer that is looking after our children. Kan?
Yelah, kalau kita sendiri, anak kita tak tidur, kita pun tak tidur lah.
Memang kan? And we know some of these families memang terpaksa tak tidur langsung.
Yes.
Through the night.
We've definitely heard of those cases. Betul.
And that cause all sorts of exhaustion, not only with the child, then there's a cycle. When you're exhausted, then we all look at, the child will get frustrated, angry. So it goes into cycles and cycles and cycles.
Yes.
So that's one, just one experience that I remember that just causes a regular prolonged anxiety that, like you say, beyond anxiety, can contribute.
Yeah, the stress, it just keeps going on kan, because it's a repeated pattern of, and also just you're exhausted, like the physical self is also exhausted because kita tak cukup tidur. Yeah, so anak kita tak cukup tidur, kita tak cukup tidur, so this is like a very clear example lah of how these things can
And the next
happen.
morning, everybody
Yeah.
has to function as normal.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go to work,
You
you
have
got to
to go to
plan,
work, yeah.
you got to organize.
Yeah.
Not only as a mother and as most of us, as a professional, not even as a professional, just to have your other regular routine.
Meal plannings.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Kena berfungsi dengan aktiviti-aktiviti harian yang memang banyak, senarai kita sangat panjang, especially sebagai ibu. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Itu dia.
Sebab pakai banyak topi kan, Didi?
Itulah sabar pun kurang kan. Bila penat sabar tu menurun dah.
Betul. So everything yang positif kurang, everything yang negatif tinggi. So okay, so
Dah
please
tak
continue.
bersyukur, dah tak sabar kan.
And another one that is not uncommon for anak-anak kami too is all the when you talk about medical condition, what it reminded me was, for example, many of our children may have skin conditions, they may have allergies, they may have eczema, kan?
Yep.
And that in itself is an additional care because dia menggaru-garu lah, contributing again to another cycle of not being able to sleep, and then going as you mentioned, to and fro, if not to healthcare, to the pharmacy,
Yeah.
constantly, stretching that care and continue, even for some families, throughout the childhood and into adulthood. Yeah,
Yes.
where it interferes with daily life, with daily play, cannot berpeluh-peluh, right? Cannot do this, cannot do that. All the cannot. All accumulate up together, let alone sebelum masuk sekolah.
Yeah.
So all these are real, as you mentioned. There is the physical. These are real physical, regularly challenging lah. Memang challenging, and it doesn't go away. Kan?
Dan itulah yang akan membawa kesan kepada emosi dan mental. Kan kadang-kadang dia bermula pada tahap fizikal dulu.
Yeah.
So there's a few ways of it lah, kan?
Right. So what about yourself?
Well, I think there's a lot of things like you said, SK, that contribute to burnout. And maybe one of those things also is just managing that additional worry, stress, or acceptance. And I know many parents of neurodivergent children who just have additional worry the minute a diagnosis comes, and then they either go into a overdrive mode of we need to work harder or we need to try more, and they try super hard, and that sometimes can be counterproductive even for the children, because as we all know, with time you have to pace therapy, you have to kadang-kadang cuba dulu, and then man lai, but it doesn't come naturally. But when something happens, if there's a need to say I need to fix it now, or you're the sort who wants to have a quick fix.
Saya.
Yeah. So when you want to have a quick fix, dia memang mencabar, and dia
So
akan
dalam contoh ni, it starts from the mental side lah.
It starts from the mental
This
side.
is the one that can contribute to the burnout. Yeah.
And when you have this mental side, sometimes you tak tidur malam sebab fikir, ada tak apa-apa cara lain? Bolehkah? And then you go into this digital overdrive of starting to read everything on the internet, everything online, and nak cuba
Tak
ini,
tidur
nak
malam
cuba.
kan, Google.
Yes. Sebab that's the
There
only
you
time
go.
you have.
Yeah.
Sebab bila anak dah tidur, baru ada masa untuk main phone kan. Actually not main phone, buat research.
Yeah. No,
Actually,
it's true.
that is the
Yeah.
key point. The reason of anxiety of having Joshua go to sleep is I need time to do other things
Yeah.
that I need to function. Kan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
So
right.
and then you want to do your research, you want to finish off whatever you may need to do, a report you need to submit, something like that, and then that becomes a mental thing if you either fall asleep while reading or are not able to do that. Sebab kadang-kadang masa nak tidurkan anak tu, kita pun tertidur kan?
Terlalu penat sangat.
Terlalu penat. And then you wake up with a start in the middle of the night, and then you're actually wondering whether you need to start now. and apa yang kena buat. So then it adds on to mental instability, and long term, if you don't check it, it will then lead to a burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didi, okay, so tadi sebelum kita orang start podcast ni, you made a very good point. I think you have a very clear primary caregiver role, kan? So we're talking about caregiver burnout today specifically. Especially for parents, but of course this can happen to, like jagalah pengasuh, any other family members, and of course those the amazing people that we employ also to support us, kan? But in your case, as a mom, memang you are fully there as a, as a primary caregiver. I'm sure you have definitely some insight into this, as well as pernah juga mengadakan diskusi dan wacana through Autism Malaysia and things like that. Share with us a little bit as we kick off this topic from your personal perspective.
Saya memang bercita-cita nak jadi suri rumah, full time mother. So what I discussed with my husband macam ni tau, okay, and when you reach a certain level of income, I tak nak kerja. But it so happened that after I gave birth, first baby, I just finished my degree. So I cakap dengan my husband, tunggu kita pindah KL, because at that time we were in Kuantan. And then pindah KL, everything was like okay. And I said that okay lah, why not have another baby? So bila anak dah dapat diagnosis, and I was almost almost nak burn out lah at that time, sebab rasa macam failure. Come on, this is my cita-cita, and then like to say that I couldn't do it. I yang nak ada anak dua, yang kata dah ready, I think we should have a second baby. So memang the first feeling was failure lah. Nak admit that I couldn't do it. Oh, this is too much. This is my max. Tahu dah sampai limit tu, I rasa macam I failed at that time. Tahu rasa macam tu. Nak mengadu pun macam, this is what you want. Apa yang you nak mengadu kan? And so masa tu penat, of course, betul lah, dengan tak tidur malam. And then at that time the first Afia was already diagnosed, and then adik kita tak tahu lagi, but apparently later she got diagnosed as well. So penat definitely. And then rasa macam tak nak pergi mana-mana. We got all the invitation. I'm a people person. I love hanging out with friends. Tapi masa budak-budak ni kecil kan, orang invite pun kita just macam sorry, tak boleh pergi. Orang nak ajak pergi kenduri ke, nak ajak pergi party ke.
Ini antara simptom orang yang social tiba-tiba tak social. Tak nak menghabiskan masa dengan kawan-kawan and all that. This is one of the things, right? So if any of you out there, just a quick insert, if you know your friend biasa suka jumpa orang, tiba-tiba tak nak, check on them.
Check on them, kan?
Yeah.
And don't give up on them, because true friends would know and say, hey, maybe not now, but let's plan even an hour of coffee, and that makes a difference.
For sure. Yeah. Sorry,
or send over coffee.
Yeah.
Send over coffee.
Cake and coffee, croissant and coffee, yeah.
Yeah. So rasa tak nak pergi jumpa orang. And then you macam betul-betul overthinking, over planning, hyper vigilant. You rasa macam you dah belajar sikit, you dah ada macam this is the strategies that you should apply kan. Kita dah buat, kita dah plan untuk reduce lah kemungkinan untuk anak kita throw tantrum, kita dah ada exit plan and everything. Tapi when things didn't go our way, dia punya frustration tu macam kita macam tak boleh terima tau, sebab I plan already, I have all these strategies, sedangkan macam in life we cannot control everything kan. Tapi masa tu macam I was like so into macam rasa nak in control sangat. I think because at that time kan my cup dah full tau. Bila something wrong je, I dah macam terus frust, terus macam rasa fail, rasa marah, sedih, sebab dah full the capacity kan. Sikit je. And then over planning tu memang of course lah, like kalau boleh semua nak perfect. There were one time because the kids they have different needs tau. So ada time kakak pergi terapi, so kita bawa adik along, but then adik tak masuk kelas terapi tu lah. So kita kena bawa lah, I kena bawa adik pergi somewhere. So at one time this therapy tu dekat shopping mall. I think many times also ada therapy dekat dalam shopping mall yang ada very nice playground. So ada masa saya akan bawa lah adik masuk the playground. It's a paid playground lah, you kena bayar RM30 and then you boleh spend time lah dalam tu. But I also tried to macam challenge adik lah for flexibility kan, supaya dia tahu macam not every time pergi you kena pergi playground. So I pakaikan dia baju pagi tu dia ada some celebration, I think raya, because she was wearing baju kurung. So dia pergi ke tempat tu dengan pakai baju kurung. So I cakap dengan dia, you cannot go into the playground pakai baju kurung, tak sesuai. So I pujuk dia lah, okay. And then I pujuk dia, kita pergi makan. So she was okay lah. And then I told the kakak punya terapi lah, I cakap, I managed to avoid adik merengek tantrum nak pergi playground juga. Walaupun playground tu depan mata kan.
Yep.
And then the therapist kan menyedarkan I thought macam I won lah, I won this, like I managed to control the situation. But she said, you are too much, like please, life is like it's not like that. You cannot control and expect every little thing. You kena ada room for like macam ada unexpected kan, despite of like you plan, but you know God is the greatest planner. You cannot like expect 100% of what going to happen in a day, isn't it? So those things macam memang betul-betul like kita tak sedar kan, kita terlampau nak control everything. Kita rasa macam if there's a strategy, this strategy should work. And kalau tak jadi, must be the way we apply the strategies. Perhaps it's not the right strategies, but perhaps there's other issues as well, other factors that happen during that time kan. So macam so many things that we need to let go to feel better, to make sure that your cup.
So you used to be very hard on yourself and perfectionist and all that lah. So that is like not the Didi I kenal.
So I think by the time you kenal me, I dah macam my cup is bigger, I think. Let go
threshold you dah besar.
I think I let go of the things in the cup. Ada cerita dalam I think 2 episodes ago, I cakap pasal kan hantar adik pergi babysitter masa kakak pergi terapi. That was like masa dia toddler kan. Masa tu sebenarnya I dah macam I dah level nak burn out. Tapi I cakap dengan my husband, cakap I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't bring the 2 kids to the hospital for therapy sebab nanti I seorang nak lari, seorang I kena dukung sambil tantrum nangis-nangis. So I couldn't do it by myself. Itu yang macam my husband kata, okay lah kita hantar pergi adik pergi babysitter. So there are times that we think that there are strategies to make us able to face the challenges, right? But actually kita boleh kurangkan kan, kita kena ada solution.
Yes.
Not solution to make you
dapat buat benda tu. Not to achieve the goal, right? But to pull back.
Yes. Yeah, to go back. So of course you guys see me smiling, but to reach this level, but
it was an amazing journey, Didi. Really, really amazing, because the Didi we know is so flexible. Really, really, she is.
The cup is overflowing.
And
it's a different kind of cup, right?
It's a different kind of cup. I think it's a proper mug now. It's not a small cup anymore.
That's what she said.
It was
big cup.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard. And then also I think having the right people around me, like there were time that I think I told SK that I felt paralyzed. That was masa tu, okay, on top of being a mom to the 2 neurodivergent kids, I had to take care of my mother as well, my sick mother. So I was saying that I felt that I couldn't even plan things for my kids, like betul-betul paralyzed at that time. And that's the thing. But at that time, I did not know that was a red flag lah, symptom of burnout. Like lagi sikit nak burnout. But I think having a group of people that we can talk to, we can be frank and honest about things that happening with us. So, and other people, like Anik said, other people looking kan, cakap, kenapa you dah berubah? You dah tak macam dulu yang suka things. So, yeah, that really helped lah. Alhamdulillah.
Actually, Didi, I just want to add that I realized at one point, because a friend who had known me for some time and who was much older than me called me up one day and said, "Oh, sorry, I missed your birthday. I hope it was good." And I said, "It went as planned, and I am so grateful for that." And she paused and she said, "Okay." And she calls me back a week later and says, "Okay, ni pelik sikit. It went as planned. And it was a normal day. What did that mean? It was your birthday." And I was like, yeah, it went as planned, and there was nothing that I had to do in terms of crisis management. And
Kasihan dia.
so they were like, then she said, "Okay, are you in crisis management mode all the time?" So baru I terfikir, oh my God. And it just took me saying it was a normal day. And I'm grateful for that. Sebab baru tersedar like, oh my God, ya kan? Sometimes as a parent I know some parents do this all the time who multitask, but especially with neurodivergent children, you are sometimes expecting the worst. So if the phone rings, you are on tenterhooks. Sebab tengah fikir, okay, good news, bad news, do I need to run? Yeah, so I think that crisis management mode became a default, which was not before.
Yeah, it should not be the case. We cannot stay in that mode, right? Yeah.
So I really want to pull in again when Anit mentioned kan, why you go into burnout actually is because kami tak rasa or tak perasan, yeah. And it takes a friend to alert us, right?
Yeah, very often it
That's-
does.
This is alert us, and that's why having the community of friends, the support groups, family is so important in our support system, kan? Because why it's called burnout is because prolonged, kan? And this prolongation is prolonged because obviously we don't recognize it. Okay? So having flags, having that external lens that memang dapat bantu kami a huge lot. I remember at one time, so as you were talking about cup being full or underfull, my phrase was, I have nothing more that I can give. And for myself, when I when I felt better and I was looking back, I said, wow, that for me as a personality is rather unusual.
It's very brave to be able to say also, if you were come to that point to be able to say.
I believe at that point, I didn't recognize it, but that was my my utterance. Yeah, there is nothing more I can give.
Also something we've never heard from her.
Never.
Hampir 10 tahun. Kita kenal.
No, it's always like,
exactly.
let's do this.
But
Come on.
But you've been there also, right?
Yes.
So, just before we go into break, because we're already at this topic, I'm just going to say that I have been through burnout. I'm exactly the one that didn't recognize it. Thank God for a bestie and a sister-in-law who did recognize it. And guess what? I was actually sent off to professional help. I was sent off to go see a psychologist to get some counseling, some therapy. This was like, I think slightly over a year post Timo punya diagnosis, and I've dah cerita sebelum ni kan, dalam masa cerita diagnosis peribadi kami masing-masing tentang anak kami, kita terus action mode kan, so membuat segala jenis macam apa-apa yang kita anggap sebagai keperluan untuk anak kita lah kan, merancangkan terapi, mencari pakai terapi, pusat atau sekolah yang sesuai, everything lah. So just in go mode, and exactly I was one of those yang dapat berfungsi, tapi at that time, yes, alhamdulillah masih boleh berfungsi, tapi alhamdulillah ada intervensi untuk diri saya sendiri yang diperhatikan keperluannya oleh orang lain. I definitely tak ada kesedaran of that. And I'm trying to catch myself a bit now. Things are, again, I think I've mentioned dalam beberapa episod pun, keadaan sangat memang mencabar buat masa ni. So I'm trying to catch myself before I go into that burnout mode. So let's take a little break, and then kita akan kembali dengan menceritakan lebih sikit tentang apakah simptom dan apa yang dapat kita lakukan dan apa akan terjadi kalau kita tidak menangani situasi burnout. Okay, we'll be back in a little bit. Continuing with our diskusi yang agak berat tentang burnout, specifically secara khususnya di kalangan primary caregiver, terutama ibu bapa. Okay, so I thought what I would do quickly is I'm going to read out antara simptom-simptom yang menunjukkan kemungkinan bahawa burnout sedang berlaku. Yeah. So I'm going to mention this right now. I think we spoke about a few of it, but I will list it. Possible symptoms of caregiver burnout. Yeah. Okay. Mentally checking out. That means that macam dia ada tapi tak ada, right? Hadir secara fizikal tapi dia memang macam tak ada di situ lah. You know what that means, right? Macam tak berapa dengar apa yang kita sebut, nampak macam tak boleh nak fokus, so that's one.
Distracted sangat, terlalu.
Yes, exactly. That's one. Secondly, memory loss. Okay, hilang daya ingatan, mudah lupa, and then perkara yang memang tak sepatutnya kita lupa lah. So for example, mungkin something that happened today, especially kalau seorang yang belum masuk pada tahap kategori warga emas, memang tak sepatutnya ini berlaku. Ketiga,
panggil brain fog juga.
Brain fog,
brain
boleh.
fog.
Yes, that can be one of it also. Ketiga, tak tahu macam mana nak rehat, tak tahu macam mana nak relax. Okay, just cannot rest. Just feel that they have to just keep going. Dan kita tengok dia, saban hari seperti ni juga. Berminggu-minggu, nampak memang tak ada chance nak rehat, dan memang kadang-kadang dia sendiri tak nak rehat. Okay, so that's the one. Kelima, I think that happened to Didi, dah tak nak social. Not really spending time with friends anymore, not doing maybe even hobbies that they used to like to do. Okay. 6, personality change, yang sangat jelas lah. Okay, personality change yang begitu ketara, and that's why seperti SK sebut tadi, your friends and all that, important family, also people yang betul-betul mengenali kita dan ada bersama. 7, insomnia, tak dapat tidur. That one is a big health issue lah, related kind of thing. Mungkin benda-benda lain juga, but that is one of the things that can happen with burnout. 8, so ni dari segi pemakanan, so something yang keterlaluan akan berlaku. Either you start eating too much, binge eating all the time, or loss of appetite. So it's like, if any of these extreme things happen dan kita tahu memang tak biasa bagi orang tersebut, that is also an indication of a potential problem. And it can also be just nampak tak ada emosi, dah tak ada doesn't look like somebody who is enjoying life lah. Right? So loss of passion for things, loss of interest in things. You can tell orang ni memang dah tak happy lah. Okay? Dan kalau berlaku secara berpanjangan, I think usually we can notice that, right? Also, general loss of interest on things yang dulu kita tahu memang dia suka. Minat kepada benda tertentu, tapi lepas tu kita nampak macam dah tak kisah langsung, right? So I think what's important to note is that any of these things is just not good for your health. Itu satu. Whether it's burnout or not, kita nak kita wajar mengenali lah ini antara benda-benda yang ada kaitannya dengan kesihatan kita, sama ada physical atau mental dan emosi and things like that. But also if you see 2-3 of these things happening, you know something is going on there, right? Okay, so I got that list out of the way. I think kita pun dah menyebut dalam bahagian pertama podcast kita tadi. But I think what we want to spend more time on is apakah akibat kalau kita tidak menangani burnout. Yeah, and then of course we, insyaAllah, we will finish up with talking about, well, how do we address it, right? Before we get to the point yang kita tak nak, which is a total breakdown. So let's go around the room one by one. Does anybody want to jump in first with something that they know actually happened, or a story of when burnout turned into a breakdown?
I'd like to start. Maybe not a story, but something we dulu ada bincangkan is actually prevention kan is better than
Cure.
the actual cure.
Yeah.
Kan? So we need really to look after ourselves. Yeah? That is actually a fundamental as a carer, that kalau kami sendiri tak sihat, susah ada tenaga untuk membantu mana-mana situasi. Yeah? So from the prevention viewpoint, ask for help. Kan? In fact, this is one of the key things we pun nak ajarkan anak-anak kami. Kalau tidak tahu, cari bantuan. Yeah? But for ourselves, that asking for help, ask, seek and you will find. Knock doors, yeah, because again, ramai yang akan bantu, but because, as you mentioned just now, we sometimes go on overdrive. So we have to be very intentional for ourselves, just as we plan for our children. We have to plan for our rest. Yeah. Even if it means that cup of coffee, kan? Because isolation in itself, yeah.
Back to that. Nampak sangat we all like our coffee and cake and croissant
cake
and
and
sebagainya.
croissants.
Actually, I like my
No,
nasi
but it's
lemak
true.
with my coffee. Actually,
Okay.
And mee siam.
yeah, I have nasi lemak time with my husband.
Oh, nice.
It kami perlu intentional to seek for help.
Okay.
I resonate with that, but I also think sometimes it's the ability to let go, because you are so focused on doing everything. And I'm guilty of that sometimes. The power to just say, it's okay if I take 1 hour off, and having that calmness to say, anything that happens, I will deal with it later. That is super important, kerana kalau tak, kita asyik buat benda yang sama, buat sampai tahap it's a sieve, it's like a tapis daripada burnout tu. Kalau dah bocor sangat, dia memang akan jadi masalah mental. And then other things like anxiety and other physical symptoms will kick in. So sometimes that 1 hour off, even if it's to do something that they think it's frivolous, like AppFab, go get your nails done, go get a haircut, just something that you enjoy, or even just sit by the park and watch the world go by, is something that is extremely important, because you will pause and you will focus on something that doesn't require much physical and mental stimulation.
Okay, I'm going to interject here because I really want to talk about how things can go badly. I know you're already talking about the prevention. I know about the thing, but sometimes I think some people have to be shaken out of their
Comfort zone.
of that whole thing. Okay, so let's just play also like devil's advocate. Okay, because of course I used to also sit over there, I think, and I think all of us at some point in time have been okay to push ourselves. Tak nak minta tolong, teguhkan aja, perfectionist, andaikan bahawa benda-benda ni semua perlu, kita okay je, buat apa kita nak minta tolong? Kita yang selalu bagi bantuan pada orang lain. Kita nak minta tolong? What? No way, So why not? I think we see a lot of people do that all the time. So I'm going to say, well, and also if that we're chosen not to talk about why it's that serious. How about we just let this continue? I think it's not so bad. You know, we can function, right? We're still
No.
going on. We are needed. Who else is going to do our work if we don't do it?
Maybe I share.
So
that
like why is
consequence.
this so bad about?
Because
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
why I
want
say
we don't want to come
consequence
to a point of no return, because
what is the no return? What is that? So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about.
where your body
What is
just
the
shuts down.
akibat?
Your body just shuts down. You get into a breakdown, and your reflexes on the road or doing anything like using a scissors can just go.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
So, Nuri, it's about really your own health. So, pushing the boundary looks like this for me. I found myself on the floor, knocked out, terpengsan, blackout. And that is a real, not burn out, it's a shutdown. So akibatnya memang ada kesan quite hebat because for a healthy person with no other medical condition, when we stress our physical being, our emotional being, the creator has a way to shut the whole system down. And fortunately for myself, I had that, what the doctor described, the CPU sudah needs a reboot. That was how it was explained to me, because I did fortunately recover with no other longer lasting or medium lasting effect. Kan?
What kind of brains do we have, ladies, that we all had to go, oh, and there was a CPU reference and need to reboot? Okay.
Because we're in a digital era.
It was a capacity overload. Itu, I think, maybe a best way. And I'm so grateful you have actually challenged us to describe it, because it is very real.
Yes.
And in again, very
And you were
fortunately,
at home,
I
somewhere,
was-
somewhere safe.
yeah,
Like,
I was found
okay.
on the floor. With no, again, without
so sorry.
without awareness, with no, what do you call it?
Memang tak ada kesedaran, and then
Nah,
terus-terus hilang
betul.
sedar.
Yeah. And remember, you always say, oh, medically, what can,
Yeah.
there's nothing that you can rationalize kerana memang akibatnya sudah all expanded, capacity all shut. So that is, I think, as parents, we do have to, in a way, in the end, recognize the responsibility we need to have a long runway for ourselves, together with our family.
Yeah, no, that's
Itu.
true. Yeah. Kita risaukan apa akan jadi pada anak kita kan. Takkanlah kita nak prematurely get sick or die, right? So it's big.
And just now, I just as you were mentioning, take time off to enjoy ourselves. Actually, aside from that, is taking time off just to rehat,
Yeah, just to pause.
just to pause. We need that pause to recharge. We need the pause to recharge, to rehat.
Yeah. You know,
And then using the same analogy, it's like when you pause, you defragmenting your thoughts, just like the computer jugalah.
Yeah.
You defragment, macam susun balik your thoughts, barulah you macam boleh fikir dengan lebih berkesan. Bukan nak kata lebih waras, tapi lebih berkesan. Sebab bila kita tengah penat, kita tengah serabut, kita nak selesaikan masalah tu macam tak jumpa kan dia punya solution dia macam. So betul lah, the pause tu help bagi kita punya otak
Clarity.
ni, kita punya
To clear the fog.
barulah.
To clear the fog. Sebab
Clear the fog.
So in the same computer analogy, the system sudah hang. Kan?
Yeah.
So sebelum hang tu yang macam sekali-sekala you kena kan switch off, like away from the things kan. Kita pun
Yes.
kita punya komputer pun tak on 24 hours.
Mode
every
AFK,
day.
AFK, away from keyboard. Let's consciously do that maybe. Yeah, okay. Actually, I am remembering that once I was I was on a course. It was a Google. It was organized by, it's something that Google, if you work for Google, you have to do it. But they also then decided to have this course for other people to kind of sign up. And my turn to share a bit of like geeky medical science. And this was very big for me because up to that point, I was one of those, I'm very proud to be a multitasking woman kind of thing. Okay. So, by the way, this multitasking thing is not real. It's our way of imagining that we can do certain things simultaneously. So, if you think you're doing things simultaneously, you're actually not. What's happening in your brain when you think you're doing all those things at the same time, which is, answer a text, talk to somebody, walk after that,
Make a
have planned
payment.
something else. Yes, exactly. Make a payment, watch something. It's your brain is toggling. So the neurons are firing alternately for everything that you need to adjust your focus and change and keep doing. And this is why all around the world, tak kira negara mana pun, semua tidak membenarkan kita menggunakan telefon kita sewaktu kita memandu. Because sebenarnya kita tak boleh buat benda tu pada masa yang sama. Memang it doesn't work that way. Our brain fires differently. So you're toggling very, very fast. You're going zzz, like this. Of course you're tired. That's why all this wonderful, proudly multitasking people at the end of the day, actually we're very tired. Yeah, so that's what happening. It's going zzz, 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 zzz. So there is no such thing as multitasking from the perspective of being able to do everything at the same time. So if you continue to try to do it and you do it for a prolonged amount of time, that's also another way to get yourself to the point of burnout. You are literally, of course you have to be tired. This is just the way your body works. Seperti kita memerlukan tidur and all that. Ini antara cara kita berfungsi. Bahagian otak kita yang berbeza-beza terpaksa macam turn on untuk masa-masa tertentu. Dan kalau kita memaksa banyak sangat benda berlaku kononnya pada masa yang sama, sungguh pun tidak boleh berlaku. That's what's happening. So yes, you are actually going to get tired. So maybe that's why after a while your CPU hangs lah. Just cannot do anything anymore. And in your case, unfortunately, you blacked out. I really am I'm stunned and sorry to hear that. But so it sounds like we don't know. Actually, we do know it's happened to Desiree. Maybe I can share that she wrote an article once on Project Hans, and when she was going through it, and that's why I'm so glad that you did bring up the. Hai, saya perlu orang bantu saya, tolong, and all that. That ask for help is very, very important because she said that when she started feeling that way, she didn't know how to. And she just also assumed that nobody was going to understand and care and that they're just not going to help. And it took like her brain to start to try to open the possibility of maybe orang tak sedar saya memerlukan bantuan. Maybe dia orang tak tahu macam mana nak membantu saya. So many things, right? So many things.
And that is
can
the
just
one that
happen.
building the support system.
Yeah.
That somebody will constantly look out.
So actually, one of the biggest things to even prevent us getting here or dealing with it is something that you have to set up in advance lah.
Yes.
Sebenarnya. So
The
we're going to go
planning,
back to that. I think almost every episode kita menyebutkan tentang find yourself a support system,
Yes.
don't be alone, find community. I mean, this is antara sebabnya for kita family. At KFam, we talk about community all the time. And here we are. Kita terpaksa buat 5 orang. We wouldn't do it without just even like 4 or whatever. No. Because we recognize that we needed this many people to be able to do a podcast consistently with an effort at some quality content that makes sense to, and then also how to do our social media. I'm very happy to say that we now actually have a full-time member of staff, so because we need to, you need a lot of people to be able to do this. Almost like you think it's like a one thing, but it's not. And so what more kalau anak kan? The whole, it takes a village. Takes the whole country, takes everything.
Beyond the village, kan?
Beyond the village, yeah. We decided that it was
Yeah.
beyond the village if it was, people with high support needs, for sure.
Nori, I just wanted to
yeah.
add in when you just now said because you were the multitasker. And a lot of women out there I know like to wear that badge. I can do it all. And they
We take a
wear
lot of pride in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, bangga. Oh,
Bangga sangat kan? And then if anything happens, then there will be everybody around them. If anybody can do it, Nori can. Because that is just expected. And it's expected even by people around you. So sometimes there is that susah sangat nak show that moment of weakness. Tapi because I think if you do, orang dah biasa dengan you buat semua. Kalau you tunjuk that moment of weakness, there will be help because they will know how big it is for someone yang boleh buat semua. Tiba-tiba cakap,
Akhirnya.
tiba-tiba cakap, actually I need help. Minta tolong
It's
boleh
big.
tak?
Yeah, I
That's
think
big.
you kena yakin lah kan. It's true. You know, we always assume that after that people gonna react badly, and I'm sorry, sometimes some people do react badly.
Oh, they do.
But
Yeah.
you know, and it's like because diorang dah biasa bergantung harap to you and all that. But I would say that if you have your family, your friends, I mean, memang sudah tentu ada yang orang memang ambil berat kisah pasal kita. That's why we're all still here today somehow kan. So you have to let yourself do that lah. And you know, the weakness actually is not recognizing that you are also human. Yes. Kan sebenarnya. And then macam mana kita betul-betul dapat memahami dan membantu orang lain kalau kita sendiri tak faham untuk berada dalam keadaan yang memerlukan bantuan. Betul? Right? Yeah. How do you have empathy if you don't know what that really feels like? Then maybe it's more like a sympathy and like a oh kesian lah, you know, or that kind of thing, right? Or like, and then it will come with this whole, yeah, you have to set that pride aside lah. You know, it's
That's a tough one.
Yeah, so it is a tough one, but it's like I think we have to look at it's a very weird word to think about vulnerability as a positive thing and a strength to be able to harness that. So I was trying to shift the word from vulnerable to how about maybe we try authentic or genuine. Maknanya you know, jadilah seorang yang jujur, right? Jujur lah. I think ini pun antara tuntutan agama kita juga, right? So kalau kita boleh menjadi seorang yang jujur, I think kita akan dapat mengaku bila kita merasai bahawa kita di dalam keadaan yang memerlukan, kita yang tak dapat nak buat apa yang perlu pada suatu masa tertentu dan sangat-sangat memerlukan sokongan, bantuan untuk orang memahami kita. And that is, you know, think about it that way. I think let's put aside words like vulnerable that maybe people don't like. Put aside the word weakness. How about we try for honesty, authenticity, be honest and be real, right?
Be real.
Be
Yourself,
real. Be
yeah.
real. When you are in a place where I can't do this anymore, or I'm in pain, or I really hurt, I'm just so sad. Just maybe we can just take ownership of that. Maybe we can try that.
Yeah. And I just
Tapi kan Nori, kita rasa people should understand kan, kita dah banyak kali cerita, kita dah being open for so many episodes, and kisah keluarga dengan anak neurodivergent ni is not new. So orang tak kenal kita personally pun kita rasa macam people should understand the struggle, sebab yelah many other families pun ramai yang ada anak neurodivergent kan. But I learned that of course kalau ada anak neurodivergent tu it will take like a while until you get your community, your support group, your friends, new
betul.
friends with
Yep.
similar challenges. But another challenges as caregivers yang I nampak as part of my experience, lepas I dah ada experience jadi caregiver to my late mother kan, walaupun not primary caregiver, tapi kita in
Sandwich
in
lah
the-
kan. That is a description for it, right?
the challenge.
Yeah. Menjaga
And then
both the generations.
bila I nampak kan So bila I nampak ada sahabat-sahabat yang mula jadi caregiver, selain daripada caregiver kepada anak autistik, caregiver kepada suami yang sakit, ibu yang sakit. So I reach out to them sebab they would share lah, they share lah dekat Facebook, this is what happening in their life and everything. So I reach out and I said, are you okay? If there's anything that you want to luahkan ke apa, you can tell me, I understand. And both of them said apa tahu, in the two instances, one, Kak, nobody asked me all this while whether I was okay or not. It's always the one who is sick, the one who has been taken care of by the person. Tak ada siapa yang tanya khabar caregiver ni. Ada yang cakap macam, ada yang cakap, Kak, saya tak tahu nak cerita kat siapa. Saya rasa orang tak faham. Memang orang tak faham because lepas tu they would share lah feedback orang lain kan. Even family members say this and that. So it shows that so much of kita rasa, we have the empathy. Tapi until we melaluinya sendiri, then only kita ada understanding yang cukup tau. So I really hope that kita punya conversation ni will be more tak payahlah semua orang nak kena melalui same experience kan. Tapi itulah, really hope that people would ask for help, would offer help, tanya khabar. Jangan macam tengok everything is okay, because come on Facebook, orang suka post benda yang best, but I would post benda yang happy je. Dekat Instagram gambar yang cantik-cantik je. So people would think that dia ada anak autism tapi dia okay je, dia happy je. Mak dia sakit tapi life goes on, dia okay je. So people should understand lah, should ada empathy tu, maksudnya elakkan judgement. So Nori had talked about this before, like pause, don't judge, and be kind, and tanya khabar, then tanya what you can do, kan, offer help. That's what I
I
think
like that about being kind, because, and I think sometimes we need to pause and be kind to ourselves.
There you go.
I think
betul.
with all of us, we have some sort of spiritual connection, and sometimes it's just parking and taking an extra 3 to 5 minutes in the car to connect with ourselves and say a little prayer, and
Betul.
kita boleh jadi tenang. Kerana instead of rushing, okay, off je engine kereta, kena lari, angkut ni, angkut tu, that 3 minutes or that 2 minutes, and I cannot emphasize that how great that power of the pause, and for me sometimes just a few seconds in the car to breathe
with the pause.
Is
Then when you can think clearly, you prioritize, and there are things like, if you cannot make your cup bigger, you can let go some of the things kan, macam okay, maybe tonight mama tak masak, mama call grab je lah kan. So delegate, make it simple kan, like simple, instead of masak from scratch, probably simple dinner today. So all those things kan, kita tak boleh, I think adjustment of life that we need to do, adjustment of expectation. You have to adjust your expectation. Don't have the same expectation before, yang sebelum you burn out, sebelum you rasa penat tu. You kena adjust that, and then adjust your life definitely. Kalau terlampau full, maybe you can kurangkan the schedule. Think about yourself, not just your children. Sebab anak pergi terapi maybe 1 hour per session, but the drive, there was one time I had to send my child pergi terapi from 4 to 5, okay, tapi daripada terapi tu habis pukul 5 kan, pukul 8 baru sampai rumah. Is it sustainable? It's not. So adjust lah, you just have to kan. So you really have to adjust your life in terms of expectation. You cannot expect what you can do before you burn out tu you boleh buat lagi forever, the same thing kan, same level of commitment and everything. Adjust your expectation, adjust your lifestyle, you simplify your life. Kalau hari yang you terlampau penat sangat, mungkin you tak perlu masak from like an elaborate dinner, you masak simple, or you can just order from Grab. So adjustment, be flexible, because kalau you sendiri yang put pressure on yourself, then susah lah kan. So adjust, termasuklah juga minta bantuan,
So
ask for help.
prioritize jugalah kan.
Prioritize, and then like Nori said also, you can delegate. It's not that you have to do everything you yang kena buat. So that's one way lah to make sure your life and to reduce the risk of burnout, inshallah.
Yeah. I think that's been quite a lot that we've all had to share. I
Yes.
think it's good that we, can finish off on things like that. One, to remember the prevention side of it, right? Don't get to even the point of burnout. Because lepas burnout tu kita dah tahu sekarang breakdown and akibat dia sangat serious, right? To our own health, and also sometimes we will endanger, especially those under our care. And once we've lost it, kita pun dah out of control kan? Kita tak tahu apa kita buat pada masa tu, and that's not something anybody wants. Of course, be kind. Be kind to people around you. Watch out now after this episode, inshallah. Please, keep your eye out. Be a little bit more mindful in seeing, what's going on with people tanya khabar. And also, as Ani said, be kind to yourself. And you also touched on it a little bit. I think, especially for us, we are Malaysians. Take some learnings from your spirituality, from your faith. That is a very, very big thing, to ask for help from the divine, from something much greater than yourself, right? Your own prayer, doa, all this. Jangan abaikan, sangat-sangat membantu. It's at that point in time where you feel very low and feel the worst, that's when you turn back to that, Not at that point when you give up and you think, it's actually that is the best point. To ask for help from all around, including on the spiritual side. Would anybody like to just maybe some quick last words before we close off for you, Kakak?
I would like to also say there is professional help. I think it's very important whilst we try to self-help. Do not forget. Yeah, and
I
jangan
benefited
bimbang.
from that. Yeah,
Jangan
of course.
bimbang.
Yeah, do it.
Get the professional help at different levels.
Klinik kesihatan pun ada counselor.
Betul. Ada counselor, ada psychologist. Get professional help when you need.
Yes.
Even make those calls to befrienders, to anybody who will lend us a listening ear. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Alright, we're good?
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Nanti insyaAllah kita akan jumpa pada episod yang lain. In the meantime, please don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms. Kami ada di Facebook dan di Instagram, TikTok, and of course you can listen to the full episodes di YouTube dan di Spotify. Please also share your thoughts and comments, give us some feedback. We would really, really love to hear from you. So thank you so much. Until the next episode. Terima kasih. Jumpa lagi.
Terima kasih.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.